Welcome to another EMA Consultancy podcast. I'm pleased to be joined today by EMA's Director, Ian Robertson. Today we're going to be discussing a matter that is challenging housing associations across the UK, the cost of living crisis and the impact on employees' pay and reward. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Stuart.
Right. Now, it would not be over the top to say that housing associations are facing an extremely tough time when it comes to staffing. I know when we spoke earlier, you said they were facing the perfect storm. Ian, explain exactly what do you mean by that?
I think there's several issues that are facing the housing sector going forward for staff and how they go about recruiting and paying individuals. I think the three factors that I would highlight are firstly, recruitment and retention of staff. There's an issue about being able to attract high caliber individuals who now have a choice of which organisation they can work for, and they can also demand higher salaries. This, of course, impacts on staff within the organisation because if they see individuals being paid more doing the same job because they've chosen to remain within the organisation, they're going to demand higher salaries. At the same time, there's an issue of salary bands. What I've seen in organisations is that where they have a band of typically, say, £25,000 to £30,000, new staff are coming in on around about £29,000 to £30,000. And of course, the existing staff within the organisation will be looking for salary awards as well to bring them in line with those new staff. The other things that I'm seeing is agile working, and many organisations have coped well with this and embedded it into their systems. But I've also seen issues whereby performance has dropped. Where this has occurred, it's predominantly because of managers not managing staff correctly and engaging with them. And I think it's organisations need to think about that and how they can train staff, well, train managers in particular, to be able to meet those demands. And the third issue I'm seeing is cost of living and the issues surrounding that. Housing organisations, probably driven by what was happening in the private sector, are now looking to pay lump sums or bring the 23 pay award forward, but also being a bit more inventive. And one or two organisations looking at the possibility of bringing in a 4-day working week to improve work-life balance, but also at the same time reduce costs of travel for people coming into work. So I think they're the three main factors I'm seeing, Stuart.
So recruiting and retaining staff has proved challenging for some time now, but housing associations now also have to rethink their pay and reward strategies to help staff get through the crisis and stop them moving on to jobs with better pay and reward. You know, what actions are you seeing housing associations taking?
I think that this falls into two parts, the immediate and how they're dealing with that, and also long term and what they need to think about the future. Certainly in the immediate, I've seen organisations again taking the lead from what the private sector did, because they were doing this 3, 4, 5 months ago, and they were looking about how they can address the inflation issues that staff are experiencing. And some of the things I've seen is a one-off non-consolidated payment, typically £500 to £750. I've also seen monthly payments of around about £50 a month for 3, 4 months and then reviewing it after that. And as I indicated earlier, the cost of living pay award typically paid in the housing sector in April 23 has been brought forward by quite a few organisations, which allows them the opportunity to pay staff now, increase payments, but also at the same time review the position in April, because who knows what inflation is going to be, and they may have to rethink that and award additional payments in April 23. The other things that I mentioned, and again, I've worked with a few organisations in the private sector which have moved to a 4-day working week, which is improving the work-life balance, but is also, as a consequence, reduce the amount of time people come into work, and of course reduces their travel costs. And I do know a few organisations are looking at the possibility of that. The other thing I've seen is providing food parcels for the low paid, giving them the opportunity to have a food parcel. Not everybody's taking it up, but some are. I think at the same time, organisations then need to think about long term and what they're going to do to attract candidates and retain individuals into the jobs. And I think they need to be a bit more creative in what they're doing. For example, thinking about, again, another organisation I'm aware of is that to get people back into work, they've provided a free gym. So people can come into work, but they can go at lunchtime to the gym. And that seems to be encouraging people to come back into work. But again, it's about providing, people now want flexible working, flexible hours. And you need to think about that and how that can be applied in your organisation. Because if you don't have flexible working, as I've seen from a recruitment perspective, you will not attract staff. So that's high on the agenda. And the last thing I would say is you've got to have good pay packages. They've got to be able to compete with the outside world, and you've got to be flexible in those pay packages.
So I guess what you're saying there is, at the end of the day, a lot of these sort of benefits are nice, but it's still going to come down to pay, especially in these difficult times. I guess one of the things taken away from that's fairly depressing, talking about food parcels for lower paid staff. But it seems the sector is sort of looking towards the private sector and see what they can learn there. You've almost touched on this a little bit, Ian. In your experience, where should housing associations be focusing their strategies to recruit staff and retain them in the long term?
I think they've got to be a bit more creative in how they go about putting their payments and the reward strategy together. So, for example, the requirements and needs of a 25-year-old would be very different to a 50-year-old. They'll be looking for different things. They don't want the same. So, for example, when it comes to a 25-year-old, typically they want more pay, but they also want better work-life balance as well. With a 50-year-old, they'll probably be looking for more security, which will include sick pay, will include pensions, but again, that work-life balance as well. So organisations need to think about how they can adapt their pay strategies, pay structures to fit individual needs. So rather than having a system which suits everybody, they need a system which is flexible and can be adapted to suit the needs of individuals. To do this will be fairly complex, it will be fairly difficult, and you will need a good HR system to be able to monitor that and make sure it works effectively. But again, there will be significant training for managers to be able to put this into place, because it does provide staff with a lot of flexibility. But that's the future of work, and that's the way it's going.
So to steal a term from our Prime Minister, it's pay, pay, pay by the sounds of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to wrap this up, I think there's always the danger that the social housing sector looks inward for answers. You've given some examples already. What do you think the sector can learn from other sectors about pay and reward in these difficult times?
Some of the things that I've seen happen outside housing is organisations stating that individuals don't have a contractual number of hours they need to work. They've given what the job is and they've got to do the job, but they're not told what their hours of work are going to be. So they can just do it as and when required. The other things I've seen is, for example, when it comes to holidays, not giving a holiday entitlement. So people are told that they've got this job to do and they've got to deliver that job, but they're not told how many days leave they've got. And the other thing that seems to be creeping in quite quickly, and I mentioned this earlier, is the idea of a 4-day working week. That creates better work-life balance, and that's a great advertising tool to bring people into the organisation, because a lot of people will find it extremely attractive. We already have that probably through compressed hours, but by saying you work 4 days a week and publicising that, I'm sure it will get a lot of people interested and wanting to work for you.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of coverage of the 4-day week recently, haven't we, with a number of trials with companies. It'd be interesting to see those results. Well, thanks very much, Ian. No doubt we're going to be returning to this in future podcasts. So for all our listeners, if you want to get in touch with Ian, do so via the EMA website or our social media channels. Thanks for listening, and look out for the next podcast.